Today is the 3rd of August. We're on the Khandha, Samyutta, chapter 22 of the Samyutta Nikaya. Now we come to Sutta 22.3. On one occasion, the Venerable Mahakachana was dwelling among the people of Avanti on Mount Papata at Kuraragara. Then the householder Halidakani approached the Venerable Mahakachana, paid homage to him, sat down to one side and said to him, "Venerable Sir, this was said by the Blessed One in the questions of Magandhya in the Ataka Vaga." Stop here for a moment. This Ataka Vaga is found in the Sutta Nipata. And Sutta Nipata is one of the books in the Khuddaka Nikaya. But the Sutta Nipata is supposed to be one of the very old, earliest books. Supposed to be quite reliable. So, in that book, the Buddha said, "Having left home to roam without abode, in the village the sage is intimate with none, rid of sensual pleasures, without expectations, he will not engage people in dispute." How, Venerable Sir, should the meaning of this stated by the Blessed One in brief be understood in detail? Stop here for a moment. This Venerable Mahakachana is supposed to be very good in explaining the suttas. And this verses by the Buddha, having left home to roam without an abode, without a dwelling, in the village the sage is intimate with none, rid of sensual pleasures, without expectations, he would not engage people in dispute. Then the Venerable Mahakachana explained, the form element householder is the home of consciousness. One whose consciousness is shackled by lust for the form element is called one who roams about in a home. The feeling element is the home of consciousness. The perception element, the volition element is the home of consciousness. One whose consciousness is shackled by lust for these aggregates is called one who roams about in a home. It is in such a way that one roams about in a home. And how, householder, does one roam about homeless? The desire, lust, delight and craving, the engagement and clinging, the mental standpoints, adherences and underlying tendencies regarding the form element, these have been abandoned by the Tathagata, the Buddha, cut off at the root, made like a palm stump, obliterated so that they are no more subject to future arising. Therefore, the Tathagata is called one who roams about homeless. The desire, lust, delight and craving, the engagement and clinging, the mental standpoints, adherences and underlying tendencies regarding the feeling element, perception element, volition element, consciousness element, these have been abandoned by the Tathagata, cut off at the root, made like a palm stump, obliterated so that they are no more subject to future arising. Therefore, the Tathagata is called one who roams about homeless. This in such a way that one roams about homeless. Let's stop here for a moment. So, in the verses, the Buddha said, having left home to roam without abode, without a dwelling. Here, Venerable Mahakachana is explaining that roam without an abode, without a dwelling. If you are in a dwelling, you are imprisoned in that dwelling. So here, if a person roams about in a home, Venerable Mahakachana says that he is imprisoned by lust for form, feeling, perception, volition and even consciousness. And one who roams about homeless has has cut off the desire and lust for the form or body, feeling, perception, volition and consciousness. So his explanation is that home and homeless is not the physical home, but the mentally being imprisoned. Now to continue. And how, householder, does one roam about in an abode? Or just now I was talking about home. By diffusion and confinement in the abode consisting in the sign of forms, one is called one who roams about in an abode. By diffusion and confinement in the abode consisting in the sign of sounds, odors, taste, tactile objects, mental phenomena, one is called one who roams about in an abode. And how, householder, does one roam about without abode? Diffusion and confinement in the abode consisting in the sign of forms, these have been abandoned by the Tathagata, cut off at the root, made like a palm stump, obliterated so that they are no more subject to future arising. Therefore, the Tathagata is called one who roams about without abode. Diffusion and confinement in the abode consisting in the sign of sounds, odors, tastes, tactile objects, mental phenomena, these have been abandoned by the Tathagata, cut off at the root, made like a palm stump, obliterated so that they are no more subject to future arising. Therefore, the Tathagata is called one who roams about without abode. It is in such a way that one roams about without abode. So here he's explaining that if the mind is diffused, diffused and confined in the abode, it's a dwelling in the sign of forms, the sign of sounds, odors, etc., the six senses. So if our attention is always going out through these six senses, then our mind becomes diffused and confined. So roaming without an abode is not being diffused and confined in the mind because of these six senses. And how, householder, is one intimate in the village? Here, householder, someone lives in association with lay people. He rejoices with them and sorrows with them. He is happy when they are happy and sad when they are sad. And he involves himself in their affairs and duties. It is in such a way that one is intimate in the village. And how, householder, is one intimate with none in the village? Here, householder, a monk does not live in association with lay people. He does not rejoice with them or sorrow with them. He is not happy when they are happy and sad when they are sad. And he does not involve himself in their affairs and duties. It is in such a way that one is intimate with none in the village. Let's stop here for a moment. Here, a monk is said to be intimate in the village if he associates too much with lay people. And how, householder, is one not rid of sensual pleasures? Here, householder, someone is not devoid of lust, desire, affection, thirst, passion and craving in regard to sensual pleasures. This in such a way that one is not rid of sensual pleasures. And how, householder, is one rid of sensual pleasures? Here, householder, someone is devoid of lust, desire, affection, thirst, passion and craving in regard to sensual pleasures. This in such a way that one is rid of sensual pleasures. This one you can understand. And how, householder, does one entertain expectations? Here, householder, someone thinks, may I have such form or body in the future. May I have such feeling in the future. May I have such perception in the future. volition, consciousness in the future. It is in such a way that one entertains expectations. And how householder is one without expectations. Here, householder, someone does not think, may I have such a body in the future, such a feeling, perception, volition and consciousness in the future. It is in such a way that one is without expectations. And how, householder, does one engage people in dispute? Here, householder, someone engages in such talk as this. You don't understand this Dhamma Vinaya. I understand Dhamma Vinaya. What? You understand this Dhamma Vinaya? You are practicing wrongly, I am practicing rightly. What should have been said before, you said after. What should have been said after, you said before. I am consistent, you are inconsistent. What you took so long to think out has been overturned. Your thesis has been refuted. Go off to rescue your thesis, for you are defeated. Or disentangle yourself if you can. It is in such a way that one engages people in dispute. And how, householder, does one not engage people in dispute? Here, householder, someone does not engage in such talk as this. You don't understand this Dhamma Vinaya, etc. It is in such a way that one does not engage people in dispute. Thus, householder, when it was said by the Blessed One in the questions of Magandhya in the Atthakavagga, having left home to roam without abode, in the village the sage is intimate with none, rid of sensual pleasures, without expectations. He would not engage people in dispute. It is in such a way that the meaning of this, stated in brief by the Blessed One, should be understood in detail. So you see, 4 lines of Venerable Mahakanchana can explain in such long length and detail. (22.5) At Savatthi, there the Blessed One said, monks, develop concentration. A monk who is concentrated understands things as they really are. And what does he understand as it really is? The origin and passing away of form, the origin and passing away of feeling, the origin and passing away of perception, volition, consciousness. Stop here for a moment. So here, the Buddha says that we should develop concentration so that we can understand things as they really are. And what is it important for us to understand? Here the Buddha says the 5 aggregates, how the 5 aggregates originate and pass away. And what, monks, is the origin of body, of form? What is the origin of feeling, perception, volition and consciousness? Here, monks, one seeks delight, one welcomes, one remains holding. And what is it that one seeks delight in? What does one welcome? To what does one remain holding? One seeks delight in form or body, welcomes it and remains holding to it. As a consequence of this, delight arises. Delight in form is clinging, with one's clinging as condition. Being comes to be, with existence with being as condition, birth, with birth as condition, aging and death. Sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure and despair come to be. Such is the origin of this whole mass of suffering. Similarly, one seeks delight in feeling, perception, volition and consciousness, welcomes it and remains holding to it. As a consequence, delight arises, etc. Such is the origin of this whole mass of suffering. This, monks, is the origin of form, the origin of feeling, perception, volition and consciousness. Stop here for a moment. So here, the Buddha says the origin of body, feeling, perception and volition, consciousness, that means the origin of body and mind, is that one is attached to the 5 aggregates. When one is attached to the 5 aggregates, being arises. If you remember, the other day we read the 12 links of dependent origination.